Hi everyone, this is Khushboo Chokshi and today we will be revising the concept of corporate social responsibility. It's a very important concept which was amended in your May 22 module. So during your May 22 exam this was amended, and there's a high possibility because it was asked also in your May 22 examination. There's a possibility that this may be again asked in your November 22 May 23 examination. So we'll quickly revise what the concept is about corporate social responsibility. Now, corporate social responsibility is basically every company, not every company, only those companies which are falling under that particular category are required to kind of give something back to the society, because they have achieved a lot and now they will have to give something back to the society, and that's basically the corporate social responsibility. It's the responsibility of the corporate to take up any social activity that has been allowed and permitted under Schedule 7. So they'll have to take up those activities as per the corporate social responsibility. Who are these companies? Who are the people? Which are the companies who have to do corporate social? It is mandatory for them to do the corporate social responsibility. Then you have to remember these 3 points, which can again be asked in your MCQ type of questions. If you are a company with a net worth of more than 500 crores or a turnover of more than 1000 crores or a net profit of more than 5 crores, if you are satisfying any of this criteria, then in that case you are a company to whom CSR is applicable and it is mandatory for you to do this corporate social responsibility. Now, very important to note here that if in any 1 year of the preceding years, if you are fulfilling this criteria, then CSR becomes applicable to you. But if, say for example, in year 2 you are not fulfilling the criteria, in year 3 you are not fulfilling the criteria, in year 4 you are fulfilling the criteria, even if you are not fulfilling the criteria, if in the preceding 3 years, in any of the 1 years you have fulfilled this criteria, then CSR will be applicable to you. Otherwise CSR will not be applicable to you. So if you want to opt out of CSR, then for all 3 years, if you don't fulfill this, then in year 5 you will not be responsible, because for 3 preceding years you are not fulfilling the criteria. So for entry there is only 1 year, but for exit there is 3 years that are applicable. Now, what are the activities that are covered? Anything which makes you feel sad or pity is something that's covered in the Schedule 7. So there's a list of activities that's there in Schedule 7. You can go through the activities, not something that will be asked in your examination. What are the activities which are not covered, which you may undertake but which is not corporate social responsibility, is something which is important to understand. So anything that is undertaken by the company in pursuance of statutory obligation laid down under section 35 is CSR, but does not include the following. What is not included here? Activities undertaken in pursuance of a normal course of business of the company. If I am a pharmaceutical company and my business is to make vaccines and things like that, then I am doing that in the normal course of business. Then tomorrow if I develop a vaccine which is helping the entire country, then in that case it's not CSR, because that is my business, that is what I am doing. So if you are doing something which is in the normal course of business, then it will not be covered under CSR. Only for COVID, if for the 3 years, if you have financial year 2021, 21, 22 and 22, 23, if you are doing any research for COVID, then you get the exemption and that will be considered towards CSR. But otherwise, if it's your normal business to do that particular thing, then it is not covered under CSR. If you are doing something outside of India, then you are not under CSR. You have already so much of poverty and everything in India, might as well work for the country. So if you're doing something outside India, if you're helping the people outside India, then that is not CSR, because India already needs a lot of help. So you have to do in India for it to qualify as CSR. Exception here is that if you're doing something outside India for training of sports personnel representing in India at national or international level, then even though it is outside India, it will be considered as CSR. But otherwise, any activity outside India not considered CSR. So anything you are doing in the normal course of business, not CSR, except for COVID for 3 years. Anything you are doing outside India except training of sports personnel who are representing India at national international level, then again it is CSR. contribution of any amount to any political party. So any amount or donation given to political party will not be considered to be CSR. Any activities which are benefiting your employees, anything that you do for the benefit of your employees, you set up a company in a rural area and you build a road for the entrance to the company so that your employees can come in easily, then that is not CSR, that is staff welfare. You are doing it for your employees, for the benefit of your employees, and hence even though the employees may be poor and everything, but again then it will not be considered to be CSR because it is for the benefit of your employees. Any activities wherein you are doing marketing or you are doing any sponsorship, you are giving out something for free, but that giving out of anything on sponsorship basis is deriving you some marketing benefit, and if you do that, then it will not be considered to be a CSR because you are giving things for free so that people can try and then they can use your products. So it's a marketing benefit that you are deriving, and hence any sponsorship activities will not be considered as CSR. And the last is if you are doing any fulfillment of statutory obligations. So if you are contributing to PF, PT, or your gratuity, anything of that sort, which is a statutory obligation which the company has to do under any other law, and if you're doing that, then again it is not CSR. So what are the activities which are not covered? The not covered part is something which is very important. So if you're doing anything which is your normal course of business, not covered. If you're doing anything outside India except training sports person, then again you are not covered. If you're doing anything which is your statutory obligation, again not covered. If you're doing anything for the benefit of your employees, not covered. If you're doing anything which is on sponsorship basis where you're getting some marketing benefit, again it is not covered. And if you're contributing anything to a political party, then again that same thing is not covered. But otherwise, if you're a company with net worth more than 500 crores, turnover more than 1000 crores, profits more than 5 crores, then in that case you have to comply with CSR and you have to contribute towards CSR activities. Now, how much is the amount that you have to contribute to the CSR activities? It is 2% of the average net profits of the 3 immediately preceding financial years. But if you have not yet completed 3 years and you have crossed any of the limits that we have mentioned earlier, then in that case 2% of the net profit of the preceding years if you have not completed 3 years, and that amount has to be calculated as per your section 198 and has to be used towards CSR activities. Now, if that amount that you are calculating as 2% of the net profits, if that amount of CSR is more than 50 lakh rupees, okay, if it's more than 50 lakhs, then in that case you will need a CSR committee. If it's not more than 50 lakh rupees, then you don't need a CSR, but if it exceeds more than 50 lakhs, then it is a CSR committee is required. See, what is CSR committee? CSR committee is basically a group of individuals that you will have to, as per the regulations, form, and they will give you places where you can invest, and they will see whether you are investing as per the norms and whether you are doing everything that's required to be done for complying with the provisions of CSR. So they are basically a committee who will advise you, who will monitor you and ensure that things are done. Why are they required? Because in 50 lakhs you're spending more than 50 lakhs, that's a huge amount, and hence a CSR committee is required. If you are less than 50 lakh rupees, your 2% of average net profit for 3 years is less than 50 lakh rupees, then in that case you don't need a CSR committee. The board of directors can discharge the function. In case of private company, 2 directors, foreign company, 1 nominated person, 1 independent person. If CSR committee is required, what are the people who are required? 3 directors, 1 of which will be an independent director, and if there is no independent director, then 2 or more directors can be your CSR committee. So you'll need a CSR committee only if the CSR amount is more than 50 lakh rupees. Now, you have to spend more than 2% of the average net profits, but sometimes, like in COVID also, a lot of companies have spent more than 2%. 2% is the minimum you have to spend, but they have spent more than 2%. In that case, the unspent, the excess amount that you are spending is something which is allowed to be carried forward. This is the change. This was not there earlier. Now it is being allowed. Earlier, if you have spent more than 2%, okay, very good, claps for you. But now they are saying if you spend more than 2%, then in that case you can carry forward that amount to the preceding, to the succeeding years. So, succeeding financial years, you can carry forward that excess amount for 3 years. Now, it is saying that you have not spent that amount, 2% is minimum you have to spend. If you have not spent that amount, you have not been able to spend that amount. Now there can be two reasons for not spending the amount. One is because you are in an ongoing project, you are making like a township which is requiring a lot of time and lot of effort, and it's not possible to finish entire thing in that 2 year in that 1 year period. So if it is pertaining to an ongoing project, then you have not spent the amount, because you feel that this amount I'll spend in next year, which or next month, which will be calculated as next financial year. So he's saying okay, no problem. And other is that you have not kind of given that money only, you have not spent that amount only. So if it is not pertaining to an ongoing project, if it is pertaining to an ongoing project, then you will have to transfer the amount to an unspent CSR account within 30 days from the end of the financial year, because you know that you have to kind of spend this on ongoing projects. So he's saying okay, no problem, you're not spend it, you're spending it in the next year, no problem, you transfer it to an unspent CSR account. You can't use that money because that is for CSR. 2% of net profit is for CSR. You have not used it, no problem, you transfer it to an unspent CSR account within 30 days from the end of financial year if it's pertaining to ongoing project. But if it is not pertaining to ongoing project, but you have not spent that amount also, but as per rule you have to spend it, so now you have to transfer it to unspent account to a fund within 6 months from the expiry of the financial year, because you can't use it, that is not your money. So you transfer it to the fund, and you have a time frame of 6 months from the end of financial year to transfer that amount to the unspent CSR account to that particular fund. Now CSR committee, what will the CSR committee do? They will give recommendations to the board, they will formulate a plan, they will see whether the plan is being implemented properly or it's not being implemented properly, and then accordingly they will revise their action plan that is there. Now if the amount spent on CSR, to be spent on CSR, is rupees 10 crores or more, that's a huge amount that a company has to spend. So if your company is required to spend more than 10 CR on CSR activities, then in that case it is saying that you will have to have a impact assessment to be made, because you are spending such a huge amount on CSR activity. Then there is a impact assessment to see that what is the impact of your spending that you are doing, and that impact assessment is also required to be made, because if you are spending that huge amount, it has to create that impact. 10 crores of amount on CSR, it has to create that impact, and hence the impact assessment is required to be made only if the amount spent on CSR is more than 10 CR. And if you do not if you do not comply with the plan, if you're not depositing the amount, or you are not spending the amount, then you'll have to give reasons as to why that particular thing has not been done in your board report. Board has to ensure that the administrative overheads that the company will incur in formulating the CSR committee or making that expenditure for CSR should not exceed 5% of the total CSR expenditure. So whatever is my CSR expenditure, say for example it's 20 lakhs, then 5% of 20 lakhs shall be my administrative overheads. That is the cost that I will incur towards the employees or people I keep in order to ensure that the CSR activity is happening. So that will not exceed 5%, and if there is any non-compliance, then the penalty will be applicable. So this is the provisions pertaining to CSR. I hope the video was useful to you. Thank you so much.